I shouldn't be telling you this, but it's been years, and I can't keep it in anymore. My name's Jack Matthews, and I live out near Timberline Ridge in the Cascades. It was late September of 1979 when this whole thing started. The rain had been coming down for days, the kind that soaks into your bones. My wife was inside, busy with dinner, and I was on the porch, just watching the fog roll in from the trees. That's when I heard it. A knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks just outside the tree line. It was the kind of sound you don't forget, deep, almost too rhythmic to be the wind. I went inside, tried to brush it off, but, well, I know how this sounds. People talk about Bigfoot, sure, but that night, something changed. I heard that same knock again. It wasn't the wind. It was something else, something waiting. Before we continue this shocking story, we encourage you to subscribe to the channel as we are trying to reach 1,000 subscribers before the new year. Life in the Cascades had always been simple for us. My wife Ellie and I lived in a small cabin about 15 miles from the nearest town, with only the trees for neighbors. We had a small farm, enough to keep us busy through the winters and give us something to do when the snow cleared. I had heard the stories, of course. Neighbors down at the general store talking about strange noises out in the woods, distant howls echoing through the night. But I never took them seriously. Who would? Just local legends to pass the time. That's how I saw it back then. In the daytime, the woods were beautiful, peaceful even. I'd go hunting for deer. Ellie would work in her garden. There was nothing out of the ordinary about our lives. But at night, that was when things felt different. The knocks started somewhere around early September. At first, I thought it was just trees moving in the wind, branches knocking against each other. But there was something too intentional about them, too measured. They weren't random like you'd expect from nature. They came in sets of 3, always 3, with long pauses between. I'd be sitting on the porch after dinner smoking my pipe, and I'd hear them from somewhere deep in the tree line. Ellie never mentioned hearing them, so I figured maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. The cabin sat on about 5 acres of cleared land, with the forest pressing in on all sides. We'd been there for almost 8 years by then, and I knew every sound those woods made. The owls at dusk, the coyotes at midnight, the way the wind moved through the Douglas firs. But these knocks were something new, something I couldn't explain away no matter how hard I tried. They had a rhythm to them, almost like someone was trying to communicate. I'd listen for them every evening, waiting. Part of me wanted to go investigate, but another part, the smarter part, probably, told me to stay put. I remember talking to Hank one evening at the tavern in town. He worked for the Forest Service, had been patrolling these woods for nearly 20 years. We were having a drink, and somehow the conversation turned to strange occurrences in the forest. He spoke in whispers like he was afraid someone at the bar might overhear him and think he was crazy. "Ain't nothing but talk," he said, swirling his whiskey. "But you hear them knocks sometimes out on patrol. Could be the wind, could be something else. I don't ask questions anymore." I didn't believe him, not really. But the way he looked over his shoulder when he said it, the way his voice dropped lower, it made me wonder. It wasn't the first time I'd heard people mention Bigfoot, but I always figured it was just folklore, something to talk about when you had nothing else to occupy your mind. Small town entertainment. Hank seemed different, though. Seemed more afraid of it than I ever was. He'd been in those woods longer than most, seen things most people never would. If anyone knew whether there was truth to the legends, it would be him. "You ever see anything yourself?" I asked him, trying to sound casual about it. He took a long drink, set his glass down hard. "I've seen tracks," he said finally. "Big ones. Too big for any bear I know. Found them up near Cathedral Peak last spring. Measured 16 inches, maybe more. 5 toes, just like a man's foot." He went quiet after that. Wouldn't say another word about it no matter how much I pressed. Just paid his tab and left. I sat there another hour, thinking about those tracks, about the knocks I'd been hearing, wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was something to these stories after all. That conversation changed something in me, made me start paying closer attention to the world around our cabin. I started noticing things I'd overlooked before: branches broken at unusual heights, trees with bark scraped off about 7 feet up. Small things easily dismissed, but they added up. And those knocks kept coming, night after night, always from the same general direction. Always 3 of them, measured and deliberate. I still didn't tell Ellie. Didn't want to worry her with something I couldn't explain, but I started keeping a closer eye on the tree line when I was outside. It was Ellie who noticed the first truly strange thing, though. One afternoon in late September, I'd gone hunting up on the ridge behind our property. The deer were moving with the changing weather, and I figured I might get lucky. I was gone most of the day, came back just before sunset with nothing to show for it. When I walked up to the cabin, Ellie was standing outside on the porch, staring down at the ground with her arms crossed. I could tell something was wrong by the way she held herself, all tense and rigid. "Look at this," she said when I got close enough, pointing to the dirt by the porch steps. There were footprints there, large bare footprints pressed into the soft earth. Not animal tracks like you'd expect from a deer or bear, but something altogether different. The toes were long and distinct, the edges rounded in a way no human foot would make them. The prints were enormous. I'd guess around 15 inches long, maybe more. Deep too, like whatever made them was carrying serious weight. I knelt down to examine them closer, ran my fingers along the edge of one. The soil was still slightly damp from the morning rain, and the print was clear as day. I couldn't explain it, and truth be told, I didn't want to. My mind was racing through possibilities, each one more unlikely than the last. "It's just a bear," I told her, even though I knew that was a lie. Bears don't leave footprints that look like that. Ellie looked at me like she knew I was lying too, but she didn't push it. "Maybe it's time we thought about leaving," she said quietly, more to herself than to me, moving closer to town, somewhere with neighbors. But I wasn't ready for that. Something about the quiet out here kept me rooted. I liked the solitude, liked being away from people and their problems. "We're fine," I told her, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Probably just some kid playing a prank, making fake tracks to scare folks. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. We were 15 miles from town, and our property wasn't easy to find unless you knew exactly where you were going. What kid would hike all the way out here just to press fake footprints into our dirt? And those prints looked too real, too detailed to be any kind of hoax. It happened on a cold evening in early November. The temperature had dropped fast that week, frost coating everything by morning. I was out by the woodshed around dusk chopping wood for the stove. We needed to build up our supply before the real winter hit. The axe felt good in my hands, the rhythm of splitting logs keeping me warm despite the cold air. That's when I heard something rustling in the trees behind the shed. Not the usual wind through branches, but something heavier. Something moving with purpose through the underbrush. Then came the knocks. 3 knocks, just like always, but this time they were closer than they'd ever been before. Close enough that I could tell they were coming from maybe 30 yards into the tree line. I froze mid-swing, the axe held halfway to the wood block. My breath came out in white clouds, hanging in the air. The sound came again. 3 deliberate knocks, wood striking wood. I should have gone inside right then. Should have dropped that axe and run for the cabin. But I didn't. I just stood there, frozen in place like a deer caught in headlights, unable to move. That's when I saw it. Just the outline at first, barely visible in the fading light. A shape between the trees, tall and broad-shouldered. Way taller than any man I'd ever known. It stood there motionless, watching me. I couldn't make out details in the dim light, couldn't see a face or features, just a massive silhouette against the darker forest behind it. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. We stood there like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds. Then it moved, shifted slightly, and I finally found my legs. I turned and ran for the cabin, left the axe right there in the woodblock, burst through the door so hard I nearly knocked it off its hinges. Ellie was at the stove, looked up startled. "What's wrong?" she asked, but I couldn't find the words. I went to the window, looked out toward the woodshed. The shape was gone. Just trees and shadows and the gathering dark. I didn't tell her what I'd seen. Couldn't figure out how to explain it without sounding insane. But I knew what I'd seen. Something had been out there, watching me. Something big. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw out by that woodshed. The shape haunted me. Its size, the way it moved, how it just stood there watching. I didn't tell Ellie. Figured she had enough to worry about without me adding to it. But I knew something was out there. Something real and close to our home. The rational part of my brain tried to explain it away. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, shadows playing with my tired eyes. But I knew better. I'd seen plenty of bears, plenty of elk. This wasn't either of those things. So I decided to try something that probably sounds crazy now. I started leaving food out for it. Started with scraps from dinner, leftover venison, chicken bones, bread. I'd put it on a flat rock about 20 yards into the tree line, right around where I'd heard those knocks. Told myself I was just trying to identify what kind of animal it was. If it was a bear, I'd find bear tracks. If it was something else, well, I'd cross that bridge when I came to it. The next morning, I went out early to check. The food was gone, completely gone. No trace of it left. No tracks in the dirt around the rock. No sign of what had taken it. I started doing it regularly after that, every night before bed. Raw meat mostly. Deer I'd hunted and dressed myself. Good cuts, too, not just scraps. I told myself it was to keep whatever it was away from the cabin, give it a reason to stay back in the trees. But if I'm being honest, I think part of me wanted to see it again. Wanted to prove to myself that what I'd seen was real. The food disappeared every single night. Never any tracks, never any other sign. Just gone by morning, like it had never been there at all. It wasn't until about a week into this routine that I let myself think the word, Bigfoot. I'd heard all the stories growing up, knew the legends from the Pacific Northwest. Most people treated it like a joke, something to laugh about over beers. But standing there in my yard, looking at that empty rock every morning, it seemed less funny. It seemed possible. I remembered Hank's story about the tracks up near Cathedral Peak. 16 inches long, 5 toes. I remembered those footprints by our porch, the ones Ellie had found. They matched the stories I'd heard. All of them. And now something was taking the food I left, something that didn't leave tracks, something that moved through the forest without making a sound. I kept this all to myself. Ellie knew I was going into the woods before bed, but she thought I was just checking the property line, making sure everything was secure for the night. I let her think that. It was easier than trying to explain what I was really doing. I kept feeding it every night. The routine became almost comforting in a strange way. I'd finish dinner, wait until full dark, then take whatever meat I'd prepared out to that rock in the trees. Sometimes I'd stand there for a minute, listening to the night sounds. Other times I'd just leave it and go back inside. I felt stupid doing it, like I was some kind of fool leaving offerings for a ghost. But there was something calming about it too. Something about knowing it was out there, watching over the property. That's how I'd started thinking of it, not as a threat, but as some kind of guardian. Then things started to change. The knocks grew louder, more frequent. They'd come at all hours now, not just in the evening. I'd hear them at 2 a.m, at dawn, in the middle of the afternoon. Always 3 knocks, always from the same general direction. And I started hearing other things too. Low growls in the night, deep and rumbling. Not aggressive, just present, like someone clearing their throat to announce themselves. And sometimes, when the wind was right, I'd catch a smell, musty and wild, like wet fur and earth and something else I couldn't quite place. Ellie noticed it too, though she didn't say anything at first. I could see it in the way she moved around the cabin, always checking the windows, always listening. The way she'd pause mid-task when those knocks came, her head tilting slightly. One night, she finally asked me about it. "What is that sound?" she said, her voice quiet. "Those knocks. You hear them too, right?" I nodded, didn't trust myself to speak. "What do you think it is?" she asked. I just shrugged, told her it was probably trees falling in the wind. She looked at me like I was lying, which I was, but she didn't push it. I think she was scared, too proud to admit it. The tension in the house grew. We'd always been comfortable together, easy in our silence. But now the silence felt heavy, loaded with things unsaid. I'd catch her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, worry written all over her face. I wanted to tell her everything about the shape I'd seen, about the food I was leaving, about the way I felt drawn to whatever was out there, but I couldn't find the words. How do you tell someone you've been feeding a Bigfoot? How do you explain that you're not afraid of it anymore, that you're actually starting to feel protective of it? The knocks kept coming, night after night, and every night I left food, and every morning it was gone. This went on for weeks. November turned cold and wet, rain coming down in sheets, but the routine never changed. The knocks, the food, the empty rock in the morning. It was like we'd established some kind of understanding, some unspoken agreement between us. I started keeping the shed locked around mid-November, the small storage shed about 50 yards from the main cabin, where I kept tools and hunting equipment. Ellie never went in there anyway. She thought it was just full of my junk, old equipment and spare lumber. But the truth was different. I can't quite explain when it started or why, but the Bigfoot had begun coming closer to the buildings. Not to the main cabin, thank God. That would have scared Ellie beyond reason. But to the shed. I'd see signs in the morning, the padlock turned at a different angle, dirt disturbed around the door. I couldn't explain it to Ellie. Couldn't even fully explain it to myself. It wasn't about the food anymore. That felt almost secondary now. It felt like something more personal, like we were building some kind of relationship. That sounds insane, I know. But that's what it felt like. The creature would come to the shed at night, stand outside it. I knew because I'd started staying up late, watching from the cabin window. I'd see its silhouette against the tree line, massive and dark, moving toward the shed. It would stop just outside, like it was waiting for permission. One night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went out there, left Ellie sleeping in bed, pulled on my boots and coat, and walked out to that shed with just a flashlight. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to keep moving. When I got close, I could smell it. That same musty, wild smell I'd caught on the wind before. Stronger now, immediate. I could hear breathing too, deep and slow, just on the other side of the shed wall. I stood there for a long moment, deciding. Then I cracked the door open. Just a little, just enough. I didn't see it clearly that first night. Just a sense of something large slipping past me in the dark, the smell overwhelming, the sound of careful movement. It stayed in there maybe 5 minutes, then left just as quietly as it had entered. I locked the door behind it, went back to bed. My heart didn't stop racing for an hour. After that night, I started leaving the door cracked on purpose. Never open, just cracked a few inches. An invitation. It would come most nights, slip inside, stay for a while, then leave. I never knew what it did in there, never checked in the morning. Somehow that felt like it would be a violation of trust. This became the new routine. Food on the rock, door cracked at the shed. I felt like I was living 2 lives, one with Ellie during the day, normal and ordinary, and one at night with this creature I still couldn't fully believe was real. I never told her. She'd never understand. Hell, I didn't understand it myself. But I kept doing it anyway, night after night. Then, one night in early December, everything changed. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about the creature out there in my shed. So I got up, pulled on my clothes as quietly as I could, and went out there. The cold hit me like a wall. Winter had fully settled in by then. My breath fogged in front of my face as I walked across the frozen ground. The moon was nearly full, casting everything in silver light. I could see the shed clearly. The door still cracked like I'd left it. When I got close, I heard something. Not the usual sounds, breathing, movement. This was different. It was almost like talking. Low and rumbling, but with a rhythm to it. I froze, listening. Not words exactly, nothing I could understand. But there was intelligence in it. Meaning. My hand shook as I reached for the shed door. I should have turned back right then. Should have run back to the cabin and pretended none of this was happening. But I didn't. I pulled the door open wider and stepped inside. It was sitting there in the corner, massive, even hunched down. The moonlight coming through the small window showed me more than I'd ever seen before. Dark fur, matted and thick, long arms, hands that looked almost human, and its face. God, its face. The eyes were what got me, large and dark, watching me with an intelligence that made my stomach drop. This wasn't an animal. Whatever it was more than that. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity, neither of us moving. Then I heard it. Not out loud, not with my ears. Inside my head, like a pressure, a feeling that resolved into meaning. Stay away. It wasn't angry, just tired. Weary in a way I felt in my bones. It felt like a warning, but not a threat. More like advice. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, my whole body frozen in place. I wanted to move, wanted to speak, but I couldn't do either. The presence pressed in on me, heavy and overwhelming. Stay away, it said again, that same feeling inside my mind. Then it stood up, unfolding to its full height. It had to be 8 feet tall, maybe more, its head nearly touching the shed ceiling. I pressed myself against the wall, giving it room. It moved past me, slow and deliberate, toward the door. Stopped right next to me for a moment. I could feel the heat coming off it, smell the wild musk of its fur. Then it looked at me one more time, those dark eyes holding mine. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental. I wasn't just feeding it. I was protecting it, keeping it safe from something. From people, maybe. From being discovered. It left the shed without another sound, disappeared into the darkness. I stood there shaking for a long time after it was gone. I don't know how to explain what happened after that night, but something shifted in me. I started to understand why it was here, hiding in these woods. I'd known about Bigfoot my whole life. The stories, the legends, the supposed sightings. Most people treated it like a joke, something to laugh about. But now I knew the truth, and the truth was sad. This creature was afraid. Not of me specifically, not of the food I brought or the shelter I offered. It was afraid of what humans represented. Afraid of being discovered, captured, studied. Afraid of becoming a spectacle. Over the next few weeks, I spent more time at that shed. Not inside it, that felt wrong somehow after what had happened, but nearby, sitting on the ground with my back against the wall, just being present. The Bigfoot would come most nights, and we'd exist in the same space without speaking. Sometimes I'd talk to it, tell it about my day, about Ellie, about life in the cabin. I don't know if it understood my words, but it seemed to listen. Other times we'd just sit in silence, and that was fine too. Better even. One particularly cold night, I asked it why it was here. Asked it out loud, my voice quiet in the frozen air. Why do you come here? Why trust me? I didn't expect an answer, not really, but I felt something, that same pressure in my mind as before. Not words, but images, memories maybe. I saw flashes of things, men with guns, helicopters overhead, trees burning, dogs barking, people shouting. Fear, overwhelming and absolute. And through it all, one word kept echoing. Humans. I understood then. This creature had been hurt before, or knew others who had been. It had learned to fear us, learned to hide, and somehow by sheer chance or fate or dumb luck, it had found me. Found someone who would feed it, give it shelter, keep it secret. I felt the weight of that responsibility settle on my shoulders. "I won't tell anyone," I said to it, meaning every word. "You're safe here. I promise." I don't know if it understood, but it stayed there with me longer than usual that night. We sat together in the cold until the first light of dawn started touching the horizon. I started thinking of the Bigfoot differently after that. Not as a legend or a monster, or even really as an animal. As a person, almost. A being with thoughts and feelings and fears, just like anyone else. It had chosen to trust me, and I couldn't take that lightly. The knocks became less frequent after that night. Not gone, but quieter. The creature still came to the shed, still took the food I left, but there was a piece to it now that hadn't been there before. An understanding. We'd crossed some kind of threshold together, moved past simple coexistence into something that resembled friendship. Strange as that sounds, impossible as that sounds, but it was true. I told myself I was crazy for what I was doing. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to stop, to tell someone, to do literally anything other than what I was doing. I was hiding a Bigfoot in my shed, feeding it, protecting it. I was lying to my wife every single day, sneaking around at night like I was having some kind of affair, but I couldn't stop. Something about it felt right in a way I couldn't explain. Like this was what I was supposed to be doing. Like everything in my life had led me to this moment. The winter got harder. Snow came early that year, piling up around the cabin. We got snowed in for almost a week in mid-December, couldn't even get the truck down to town. Ellie was going stir-crazy, pacing the cabin, talking about moving somewhere warmer. I just listened, nodded, didn't commit to anything. How could I leave now? Not when the Bigfoot depended on me. I went out every night, regardless of the weather, trudging through knee-deep snow to leave food and check on the shed. Ellie started asking questions. "Where do you go every night?" she'd ask, watching me pull on my boots. "Why are you always checking that shed?" I told her I was worried about the roof, about equipment freezing, about 1,000 small lies that piled up on top of each other. She knew something was wrong. I could see it in her eyes, but she didn't push too hard, and I was grateful for that. The guilt ate at me, though. She deserved better than a husband who kept secrets, who prioritized something in the woods over his own marriage. But I couldn't stop feeding it. I couldn't stop going out there. Every night I'd trudge through the snow, leave meat on the rock, check that the shed was accessible. Sometimes I'd see tracks in the fresh snow, enormous footprints that would be gone by morning, melted or covered. The Bigfoot was getting bolder, or maybe just more desperate. Winter was hard on all of us, but I imagined it was hardest on a creature trying to survive in these mountains. It needed the food I brought. It needed the shelter of that shed, and I needed to provide it. I don't know why I felt that responsibility so strongly. Maybe because it had shown itself to me, trusted me. Maybe because keeping it secret felt important in a way nothing else had in my life. Whatever the reason, I was committed now. There was no going back. The Bigfoot had become part of my life, woven into my daily routine. I thought about it constantly, during breakfast, while chopping wood, lying in bed at night, listening for those 3 knocks. It consumed me in a way that should have been unhealthy but somehow felt necessary. I was protecting something ancient, something that shouldn't exist, but did. And that felt like the most important thing I'd ever done in my life. It was the dead of winter when it came for the last time. Mid-January, the coldest night we'd had all season. Ellie had gone down to Portland to visit her sister. She'd been planning the trip for months, needed to get away from the cabin. I encouraged her to go, told her I'd be fine on my own for a few days. Truth was, I welcomed the solitude, welcomed the chance to be honest about what I was doing, to not have to hide or make excuses. That night I heard the knocks, but they were different this time, more urgent, more insistent. Not the usual measured 3 knocks, but several sets, rapid and desperate. I grabbed my coat and went outside immediately, didn't even bother with boots. The cold bit through my socks, snow soaking them instantly. I didn't care. The Bigfoot was standing in the middle of the clearing between the cabin and the tree line. Not hiding, not in the shadows, just standing there in the open, visible in the light from the cabin windows. This was the first time I'd seen it fully, clearly. It was massive, had to be 8.5 feet tall, covered in dark brown fur that looked almost black in the night. Its shoulders were impossibly broad, arms hanging down past its knees, and its face. I'd never seen anything like it. Almost human, but not quite. Features that suggested intelligence and emotion. It was looking right at me, those dark eyes reflecting the light from the cabin. It didn't approach. It didn't move at all. It just stood there like it was waiting for something, asking for something. I walked toward it slowly, my feet numb in the snow. When I got about 10 feet away, I stopped. We looked at each other in silence, two beings from different worlds. I felt that pressure in my mind again, that sense of communication. But this time, it wasn't words or warnings. It was gratitude, deep, overwhelming gratitude and sadness. The Bigfoot was saying goodbye. "You're leaving," I said out loud, my breath fogging. I didn't need an answer. I could feel it in the air between us, in the way it stood there, in the finality of this moment. It had stayed as long as it could, survived the winter with my help. But now it needed to move on, find somewhere safer, somewhere more remote, somewhere away from people, even well-meaning ones like me. I understood. I'd always known this couldn't last forever. "Be safe," I told it, meaning it with everything I had. "Stay hidden." It made a sound then, low and mournful, almost like a whale song, deep and resonating. I felt it in my chest, vibrating through my bones. Then it turned and walked back toward the tree line. It moved with surprising grace for something so large, silent despite its size. I watched it go, watched it disappear into the darkness between the trees. The knocks stopped after that. I never heard them again. I never told Ellie what had been happening those months. When she came back from Portland, I acted like nothing had changed. Went back to my regular routine, stopped going out at night, left the shed locked. She noticed I seemed different, lighter somehow, asked me if I was feeling all right. I told her I was fine, better than fine. And in a way, that was true. The guilt of lying was gone. The weight of that secret was still there, but it felt different now, more like a treasure than a burden. I know what people will say if they ever hear this story. They'll laugh. They'll call it fiction, a tall tale. They'll say Bigfoot doesn't exist, that I imagined the whole thing. Maybe I did. Maybe the isolation got to me that winter, made me see things that weren't there, but I don't think so. I remember the smell too clearly, the sound of its breathing, the feeling of its presence. Those things were real. The creature was real, and I can't unknow that now. I can't forget what I learned about it, about the fear it carried, about why it hid from us. Sometimes I wonder if I should have told someone, a researcher maybe, or someone who studies these things. But every time I think about it, I remember that feeling it shared with me, those images of guns and helicopters and fear. I remember the trust it showed by coming to my shed, by letting me see it, and I know I made the right choice by staying quiet. Some things are more important than proof. Some creatures deserve to stay hidden, to live their lives away from human curiosity and human violence. The Bigfoot trusted me with its secret, and I honored that trust the only way I could, by keeping quiet, by protecting it even after it was gone. So here I am, decades later, talking into this recorder, trying to make sense of it all. I'm not sure why I'm doing this now. Maybe to finally say it out loud. Maybe because it feels like the only truth I've got left. Ellie passed away 5 years ago. The cabin's been sold. I live in town now, in a small apartment that feels too cramped after all those years in the woods. But I still hear those knocks sometimes. In my dreams, in the quiet moments before dawn. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. And I remember it all, the Bigfoot, the winter we spent together, the understanding we reached. I won't ever forget. I can't. It changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. That creature taught me something about trust, about protection, about keeping secrets that matter. I don't even like saying Bigfoot out loud anymore. Feels too casual for what it was, what we were, but that's what it was. And I'm grateful I got to know it, even for just those few months, even if no one believes me.